see the assignment sheet. So if you have docx and PDF, so if your computer doesn't download docx for whatever reason, look at the PDF as well. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you on my screen in just a moment. And so if you're going to submit them on this Complex Book Entries tab, this is where you find this, okay? So this is the assignment sheet here. I heard something going on. Okay, so this is the assignment sheet I'm about to share with you. So you could also download this yourself at any time. The assignment sheet isn't going to give you the opportunity to submit them. It's just the directions. To submit them, you'll go to that Commonplace Book Entry tab. And if you have any questions while I'm doing this, while I'm talking about it, please just put it in the chat and I'll come back. I can't see them at the moment, but I'll come back and I'll definitely answer them as when I come back. So Commonplace book, what the heck is it? That's the question I'm going to answer. So it is not a collection of arguments, but a collection of ideas that a reader compiles from a text. So as we do research throughout the semester, our second and third papers are going to require research, citations. And so what we're going to be doing now is kind of practicing those smaller skills that are needed to do those research papers later on in the semester. So typically when you're researching, you're finding your own sources. If you have a longer, essay, say you have a 20-page article you find online, you're not gonna use all 20 pages. You might find a quote or two, maximum, absolute, you might quote a paragraph, like absolute at maximum. You're not gonna do the whole essay. So how do you know what you're gonna cite? How do you know what quote to use? So this assignment, at least part of it, is meant to kind of help with that, trying to find quotes that you might use for a paper. And while these essays that I'm assigning for each class period are not necessarily going to be used in the actual essays that you write later in the semester, it is that practice of that annotating. So when you annotate, you might highlight something. You might, if you have it printed off in front of you, you might write a note on the side of it in the kind of the corner. But this is kind of practicing that skill of annotating, of finding the passage, and also with MLA format. So the criteria, each entry is going to be worth 25 points. And there's 5 different criteria here, and I'm going to talk about each one. The first one is citing the source correctly using MLA format. And citing the source, I mean, when you write a paper and you use any information that is not yours, that is somebody else's other than yours, it's published work, you need to put it in your paper and acknowledge where that information came from. So MLA format is a type of citing source that is used in the humanities, specifically English. If you're in a psychology class or maybe a nursing class, you're probably using APA. I greatly apologize if you're taking this and one of those courses in the same semester, because you will have to kind of go back and forth between MLA and APA, which can be very confusing. I can help with that if you need me to. So, but you'll cite the source as you would for the works cited page, and later on in the class, I'm going to talk more about that. Then you're going to include one quote that catches your eyes or seems interesting to you. It can be any quote from the reading that I assign. Okay, it doesn't have to be anything specific. I don't care which quote it is. It just has to be something you jump out. Similar to if you were reading an essay for research. How do you know which quote you would use? And so this would be something that's just interesting to you. Then for that quote, you would write at least a full paragraph that engages in that quote. And so it could be something that it reminds you of, maybe a TV show or a YouTube video. Could be, the first one we're doing on Tuesday is a chapter of the textbook. So if it talks about writing, you could talk about a previous English class or writing class experience with writing, something along the lines with that. Please don't summarize the quote. I can tell myself what it says, but make sure you're engaging with it. What does it remind you of? Why did you choose this quote out of all the others in that essay? Please make sure they're full sentences. And so making sure that you're engaging with that. Then you're going to answer the next 2 questions and write a paragraph engaging in both of those questions. So the first one is, who is the audience in this essay, and what is the purpose of this essay? And I have down here, by audience, I mean a general group of people who the author is more than likely intended to read their piece of writing. Please don't answer everyone. Most audiences are not literally everyone in the entire world. However, you don't want to be super specific either. You don't want to say like a 20-year-old college student from only Hillsborough, Missouri. Unless there's like an ad for to like join the soccer team, it's probably not going to be only that type of people. Most, like if you look at an ad online for like Tide detergent or to buy a car, those are not only going to be only 20-year-old people from Hillsborough. They're going to be more general. But not everybody's going to buy that Tide, and not every single person is going to buy that car. So when you read that text, you're going to have just a sentence explaining who the audience is, and the paragraph explaining why you think that audience is the way it is. Purpose means what the author wants the audience to understand. What is the main point? Why does this text matter to that audience? And so we're going to use these two a lot over the semester. We're going to do a rhetorical analysis essay. And by rhetoric, I mean the art of persuasion. Some of you may have heard this term before in a previous English class. If you've ever heard the words ethos, pathos, and logos, you probably have done something with it. But audience awareness and purpose are really important. The first essay, we're going to write a narrative, and you're going to really need to be able to understand in your own writing who the audience is you're writing to and what your purpose is. And so I'm hoping that by being able to answer that question, who the audience and purpose of other pieces of writing are, that you're more easily to be able to say what your own audience, who your own audience is, and what the purpose of your own piece of writing is as well. So each one of these skills you're going to be doing for your own, each essay that you read that has a commonplace book entry attached to it. Each skill I'm hoping will help you in other skills. With MLA format and citing, I'm hoping that you learn how to cite on your own instead of just having that like a citation generator like easybib.com or something do it for you. At the very minimum, if you do use a citation generator, I hope that by learning how to cite yourself, you will be able to understand if it's correct or not. Some of those citation generators do it incorrectly. They might do a previous version of MLA format that's outdated. They might use APA or Chicago, and I can usually see really quickly why it's wrong, if it's outdated or APA. And so just being able to see if it's wrong, and if it is wrong, fix it yourself. And so being able to understand on your own what that is. So right now I'm going to pause. Does anybody have any questions about that assignment sheet before I move on? Or what the assignment is? I actually don't think I was sharing my screen there. I apologize. So yeah, but you could, if I stop sharing my screen, I am so sorry. But this is the assignment that I was looking at. You could have looked at it yourself too. But I'm looking back. I don't see any questions here. If you do have a question, I'll come back later. I do want to practice this a little bit though. I'm going to try and have this on my screen 50-50 so I can see if there's any questions in the chat. You should still be able to see. I do want to kind of be able to be assured that you all know what I'm talking about. If I have, so I'm going to put up an image because a lot of times it's a little bit easier to be able to see an audience and purpose if you're looking at an advertisement or an image opposed to like a chapter of a textbook. But so I have this image up here, and I think you guys should all be able to see it. It's just an ad that I've used in previous classes before. Who is the target audience of this image? Somebody just shout it out or put it in the chat. Who's the target audience of this? Okay, people who drive and talk on the phone.
Drivers, yeah.
A lot of drivers. Distracted drivers, yep. So any other audiences? I got a lot of people saying drivers, people who drive distractedly. Definitely, I think that's one audience. Any other specific audiences that you might think of? Anybody else who they might be intended? You're all correct when you say drivers or distracted drivers. Well, who's the kid too, but who's the one driving? It could be teens. The kid isn't going to be the one driving. If the kid, yeah, parents. Okay, there you go. Addie said parents. Yes. So distracted drivers in general, which could definitely incorporate teens, because teens are typically getting their license for the first time. They're less experienced than maybe other drivers. Doesn't make them bad. It just means they're less experienced. So yes, any driver that might be on their phone, or anything like that, but also parents. And so those are the two more general audiences that this image was probably thinking of. What is the purpose of this? What is this image trying to persuade distracted drivers and parents of? What is the point of this?
Basically telling you so that accidents don't happen as much as they would normally, because lives are very important for all systems and for everyone. Everyone's equal. Diversity.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. As Jacob, you said, lives are very important. Crystal, you said not to do it because it can take a life. So yeah, so persuading a driver or a parent, if they are going to be distracted in the car, it could risk the life of not only a person but a child. And in the way saying, what if it were my child? You see the kid's eyes in the backseat on the rearview mirror, kind of parallel with the kid's face on the outside of the car. Yeah, so if you are doing this, you're not going to have an image for your complex book entry, but this is a lot quicker to kind of talk about in class. So if you were actually, if you were going to write about this image on the complex book entry, you would have maybe a sentence saying the audience is parents and or distracted drivers, and then you would have a paragraph describing that. The audience is this because, and then you have your reasoning for why that audience is the way it is. If you were talking about the purpose, you might say the purpose of this image is to persuade distracted drivers and or parents to not drive distractedly because, and talk about your reasoning behind that answer. And so that's kind of the reason what you would do. Exactly, you guys were right. That's what you guys would do. Yeah, Sean said, think of both points of view, someone who's an accent, how families would be affected. Yeah, it's trying to get people, and also you don't have to be a parent to have that being persuaded. You can be a driver. Even if you're not a driver, if you don't have a car, you can't drive for whatever reason, it's still trying to pull at the heartstrings, care about that kid who somebody might be distracted. If you are the one behind the wheel, don't be on the phone. If you're in the passenger, don't distract the driver too much, things like that. So in this assignment, you would have the MLA format kind of at the bottom. If it's at the top, I'm not going to take off for it, but the works cited page would typically be at the bottom. And then you would have that one quote about the essay that catches your eye, that is interesting to you, a paragraph expanding on it, and then you would have the answer about the audience, and then the paragraph explaining that, and then the answer about the purpose, the paragraph explaining that. Does anybody have any questions at all about that? I want to make sure everybody kind of understands that. I'm kind of checking in this here. Okay, so good question, Holby. When is this assignment going to be due? So that's probably going to be my next answer. So I'm pulling up the syllabus. So last week I talked about the syllabus for this course. At the very end of the syllabus, you have a schedule, and there's two ways that you can find out when these assignments are due. It's not just one. Throughout the course of the semester, there will be 6 commonplace book entries. So it's not just for one, you'll be doing 6. So you got to make sure you know what reading is due for what day. So I'm sharing with you, you can see the schedule right here on my computer. I have it up here, and you can see for next Tuesday, anything that I have due that you need to submit through Blackboard that's not in class will have this little word due right before it. So if you see that, this is what's due. You see complex book entry number 1 by 12:29 p.m. for BG chapter 24. And I have the wrong title. That's the old title for the previous edition. They just updated it, and I didn't know that when I was doing this. So if you don't know what BG, up at the top, it says BG Bedford Guide to College Writing. So it's a textbook for this class. So you should all be getting that textbook pretty soon. Worst case scenario, if you don't have the textbook, I have a copy of the old chapter from the previous edition. It's not the best idea, but if you're for whatever reason, not able to get that textbook, by then, please let me know. I'm not going to do that for everybody, but please try to get that textbook if at all possible. So you're going to want to, so that would be the chapter from Recalling Experience. Next Thursday, you would see it for American Dreams. And if it's not in the textbook, it's on Blackboard under assigned readings. Okay, so if it's not under textbook, it's there. So you can see on Blackboard when things are due. You can see the due date over here. You can see the reading. And then if it's a chapter, I'll have the page numbers there too. The other place you can be able to find this is on Blackboard. So if you go on Blackboard, under Complex Book Entries tab, this is where you submit them. Each one of these shows the due date, so the date and the time, and then the reading. Okay, and so you'll be able to see what it's for. And even on here, I'll say, you know, American Dreams found under the Readings tab. And so if you don't, so this is the textbook, this is out on in-class readings. And so if you forget, if there's two places you can find out where the readings are, again, the bottom of the syllabus on the schedule, and also on the Complex Book Entries tab. And so your first one is due Tuesday, next Tuesday, the 25th by 12:29 p.m. For that chapter. So read the whole chapter, and your quote can be any one of the quotes from that chapter, and then kind of expand on it, and then do the audience and the purpose. And so hopefully that answers your questions. Okay, yeah, if you want to use it, Jacob says you're using it on your iPad, you can have it digital. Sean, you asked a question, do the entries relate to our essays, or are these just different assignments that differ from our essays? So they don't necessarily directly, meaning that you're not going to be writing about any one of these readings for a specific essay. However, you are practicing skills that you will need for these essays. So your first paper, you'll need to be aware of who your audience is and what the purpose of it is. And so for that reason, we are practicing identifying audience and purpose. Later in the semester, the second and third paper, you will need to not only research and find quotes from other sources, but you'll also need to cite in MLA format. So the goal for this is to practice these skills. And so my goal is by the time we reach those second and third papers, you'll have a better understanding of citations and MLA format by the time we even reach those. I will comment on each citation or each entry for everybody, and I will reply to them. If a citation for whatever reason is not correct, I will explain how it is not correct and how you can make it correct. And then I would assume and intend for you to learn from that comment and apply those skills to the next entry. And so everyone, you're learning a little bit more. Hopefully, okay, yeah, exactly. Great, that's fantastic. Any other questions about this? I'm going to kind of jump into MLA format here, but I want to make sure nobody has any questions about the assignment, the complex book entries, before I do move on. Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So I don't think anybody has any more questions. If you do, please leave them in the chat, or I can definitely answer them. What I'm going to talk about now is MLA format, and you can see what I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at in-class readings, and I will have, I actually don't have that hidden in the students. I'm going to make it available to you all right now. On in-class readings, there is now going to be that MLA format PowerPoint. And so I, again, have it on the PowerPoint for Microsoft Word, and I also have it as a PDF. So if at any point later in the semester you want to go back and look at this, I have this up here. Excuse me, please return. There are other ways that you can look at MLA format. At the end of your textbook, you have a lot of great information about citing, different ways that you can cite. In addition, there's a website called Purdue OWL, O-W-L, they're Purdue University's online writing lab. I will talk about in this PowerPoint about what different strategies. That's also a great place to look. So this PowerPoint, back of your textbook, but also Purdue OWL is really helpful as well. So feel free to follow along with me. I'm going to come down at the top here in your PowerPoint, but I definitely have my screen shared as well, so you'll be able to follow along with me here too. Okay, so MLA means Modern Language Association. I said a little earlier, it's commonly used in the humanities. It's a type of way to show how or what you have sources you are using in your paper that aren't your own words. Any type of language or idea that you are using in your paper that is not your own must be cited. Okay, so you need to be able to show and give credit for those people's words and ideas. APA is typically going to use in more science classes, so think of nursing or psychology. Biggest difference, there's a lot of differences, but APA typically cares more about science and the year. So if you see an APA format citation, you're going to probably see the year right next to the author's name in the beginning. And the MLA citation cares about the people who wrote it. So they're going to have the author's names in full up at the top, and then they might have the title of the essay or book that you're looking at. So and the reason for that is because science typically goes outdated a lot quicker. If I cite an essay about Shakespeare from 50 years ago, it's not quite current, but Shakespeare wrote quite a few centuries ago, so that doesn't necessarily going to mean it's inaccurate. If you're writing about psychology, that science and the research involved has changed quite a bit in the past 50 years. So you want to have way more updated information, and they care more about that. This doesn't necessarily apply to the complex book entries, but for formal essays, you want to have papers in Times New Roman, 12-point font, double space, and 1-inch margins, along with indenting your paragraphs. You should have a page header on the upper right-hand side that has your last name and the page number as a running header. And when it comes to closer to the essay time, I can definitely show you how to do that, or I can share small, short YouTube videos that show you the same thing. But that helps as well. But again, don't necessarily have to do that double space for the complex book entry. I don't think Blackboard is great with double spacing, so don't worry about that too much. But for the formal essays, you'll definitely want to do this. If you're citing, one important note is that for MLA format, if you have a book that you're citing, it's going to be in italics. So, for example, textbook title for this class, The Bedford Guide for College Writing, is in italics because it is a book. If you have an article, or like a chapter out of this book, you're going to have it in quotation marks. No title will ever be in italics and quotation marks. You will never have both at the same time. You will also never have any title underlined. That's outdated. That hasn't been the case since well before 2016, when the new updated current form of MLA is going on. So think about it. Just ask yourself, one question is really important to ask yourself when you're trying to cite a source is, what type of source is it? So if you're looking at a book, you might cite that completely differently than a website. If you're looking at a journal article on one of Jeff Coe's library databases, that will also use a different format. And so in your textbook at the end, and also on Purdue OWL, they will have little headers like this is a book, or a book with more than one author, which I will discuss later on in this, or a book with no author, or a website. And so ask yourself, what type of source is this? And then go from there. So if you are citing this book, that's going to be in italics. Articles or chapters or smaller essays going to be in quotation marks. Excuse me, I'm going to drink water. I'm going to go to a quick website here in a second, but I'm going to say a lot of interchangeably in-text citation versus works cited citation. Now, if you've done any work with MLA format before, you probably already know what these words mean. However, you might not, because if you have never done works cited or MLA format before, or if it's just been a really long time, you might not know these. So I'm going to kind of go to Purdue OWL, just also so you can see what it looks like, because I think it's a really, I love this website. I think it's really helpful for a lot of people. One, mostly because they update their information all the time. And so it keeps it really current if anything does change really quickly. So what I just did is I go to MLA format and then formatting and style guide. It gives you on the left all of these different options. So you can look at books, periodicals, electronic sources. I think you can cite like a YouTube video or even a tweet, which is really cool. And so I come down here and I can look at a sample works cited page. So Works cited page will always go at the bottom of the work of the essay you're writing. And we'll have all this information usually, typically. So it's either you're going to have the last name and the first name of the author. So if there's only one author, or if you have 2 or 3 authors, the first author is always going to be listed as last name, first name. And then you're going to have the title. If you have a shorter essay or chapter, it's going to be in quotation marks. If you're just doing a whole book, you would have that in italics. Okay. Then you would have the publisher, the year it was published, and the date, and then the URL. I'll talk about this later, but if you do a website, it's a good idea to have the access date. That's just literally whatever date you are accessing it. So today would be August 20th. And the reason for this is because if you come back later or somebody else comes back to that website at a later time and it's changed or that website doesn't exist anymore, you can say, as of this date, the information provided was the information that was on that website on that date. Because sometimes websites change or they don't exist in the future. It just kind of happens. And so why we have this works cited page, it's just a list of all the sources you cited in your essay. And works cited, the works that you're citing, that you're sourcing in there. And in your main essay, you're not going to have all of this information. It would be really clunky and awkward to copy and paste all of this and put it at the end of the quote. You don't want all of this. So I'm going to pull up a sample paper that's on their website as well. I'm going to show everybody an in-text citation. So in-text citation is information that you're going to find in the actual body of the essay. I'm getting all these ads. Go away, ads. So for example, here, I know this is a little bit small. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. We can see the last name of the author and the page number that source was found on. All in-text citations are only going to have 2 things. They're going to have the last name of the author or multiple authors if you have more than one, and then the page number that you found that information on, if it's a book. If it's a website, you're not going to have a page number more than likely, so it's if applicable. I'll talk about a little bit later on what happens if you don't have an author, but typically if you have an author, last name of them and the page number. And so if you had all of that information in the works cited page right here, that would be really clunky. Your reader wouldn't want to have all of that. Again, let's think about audience awareness like I talked about earlier. So what you really want to do, just have this in parentheses, and it shows where you got that information. And so they have several of these. They have this person, they have Hurt. They have several different in-text citations. And so this just makes it easy for the reader to read your essay. It flows really nicely, and it doesn't have all extra information. If the person wanted to, the reader, they can look, okay, what is this actual text? What is this person written by Hurt? And they can go down to the very bottom, and they're going to see all the other information. They can see that it was written by Douglas Hurt. It's a book called American Agriculture, A Brief History. Okay, and so they can see that. But you don't want all the information in your paper. That wouldn't be very easy to read. You want to have the information at the bottom, but not in the body of your essay. So that's the difference between in-text and works cited. When you're writing your commonplace book entry, you'll provide a works cited citation at the very minimum, in-text citations too, but make sure you have that works cited citation at the bottom. I'm going to come back if I see any questions. All right. So I got a few questions here. So if the person in the paragraph stays the same, do they have to keep writing the last name? Okay, that's an excellent question. So Tori's asking a question. It depends on how often you're using it. Like if you're using the same paragraph, you typically can get away with saying it once or twice. However, if it's not obvious that you're getting all that information from the same place, it might be good to enter it again. But you can say you have like a paragraph. If all the information in that paragraph came from Hurt, I would say maybe putting a citation in the middle, just so it's clear to your reader that you are all that information came from the same place, but you don't necessarily have to have it after every sentence. If you do end up going from Hurt to Smith back to Hurt, then you have to, because you want to make it obvious that that's the person you got it from. But it just don't go too long without having another citation, because then your reader might not know that it's all from the same place. Oh, you're welcome. Crystal, Okay, so yes, so that's a great question. Crystal's asking, I can't find recalling experience in the book. I said earlier, you may have missed me saying it. Recalling experience, I accidentally have the wrong textbook chapter. It's correct, it's chapter 4, but they just added a new addition to this textbook, and the one I just literally used in May was recalling an experience, and I just didn't know that, so I didn't change it. But now I do, so I'm going to go in and change that, but you should be using recalling and observing. It's the same thing. It's just for some reason they changed it. Don't know why. They got to change all this stuff. It's annoying. I don't love it. I'm not a big fan of them having different editions. I'm trying to go back. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to go back and answer some more questions there too. So in text citations, again, body of the work cited citations at the end. And you should be citing every single piece of information you have. I just showed some examples, but I have some examples here. So you might have like the Burke 3 at the end. If you have quotation marks on the last word of that sentence, you're going to have quotation marks after that last word, and the period's going to go at the end of that citation. And so it's not going to be at the end after animals. It's going to be at the end of that parentheses right there. And this is an example of a works cited citation, which I'm going to go over in a minute. This is an example of a citation that you might find in like EBSCOhost or JSTOR, which are both really helpful databases that you can access through the library's database. Once we start on once we start on the second essay, I'm going to have a whole class period kind of about how to use those sources, and we'll practice with that. But this is information if you find like a journal article. I just talked about that works cited citation, so if anybody is wanting to go and look at that works cited example, you can follow that link as well. Again, this whole PowerPoint's on Blackboard. I'm also never going to quiz anybody on MLA format. I talked about Tuesday. I don't think quizzes can be that helpful. I don't memorize MLA format. I know it really well because I've been doing it for over a decade, off and on, and so it's very easy for me to look at a citation and kind of know what's wrong with it, but I don't necessarily memorize it. I just know because I've been working with it for so many years. But I don't expect anybody to memorize it. This is just information that is needed to know, and you can come back to this PowerPoint as many times as you want and kind of look through over these points. And these are other examples of in-text citations. And the one other point I wanted to note is that I said earlier you want to have the last name of the author and the page number in your in-text citation. However, if you notice, the first one and the third one don't have that. The reason for this is if you state the person's last name in the sentence itself, you don't need to put it in the parentheses in the in-text citation. So if anywhere in that sentence you state Wordsworth said this, that's good. In this sentence, they don't say his name, so they have to put it in the in-text citation. And you need to cite two in-text citations regardless if you have a quote like these two do, or if you're summarizing or paraphrasing. So summary being a large body of work. So if I'm summarizing a whole chapter or a whole book, paraphrasing being putting in your own words a small sentence or a paragraph. It's not a whole lot of words, but you're putting, both of them are putting them in your own words. But if it's somebody else's idea or direct words, you still have to cite that. And this is that other citation I had just a minute ago, and I know it might look confusing, so I wanted to kind of break it down a little bit, and you can see you have Crabbe as the last name of the author and Tim is the first name of the author. Always make sure you write the name of the author as it is listed. Just like on Tuesday, I ask everybody, if you have another name you want me to call you by, I definitely will call you by that. I've been trying really hard. Some of you have been trying. If I missed you, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to call you by your nicknames, whatever name you prefer. Authors of these works are doing the same thing. So if he wrote Timothy, you would write Timothy. If he wrote Tim, you would write Tim. If they have a middle initial, you write that. If they have a full middle name, you would write that. So they're just put whatever they wrote down. I actually saw a meme or something on Facebook or Twitter. I don't know what it was, but it's just a few weeks ago. And some kid, I think it was a high school student, he was doing a book report from Neil Gaiman. And Neil Gaiman is a really famous author. He did American Gods. He wrote the graphic novel Sandman and a whole bunch of other stuff. Really famous author, and he was doing a book report on one of his books, and the teacher said what most teachers will commonly say is, use their last name in your writing. You want to be professional. They're not your friend. And he ended up tweeting to Neil Gaiman saying, my teacher said I can't use your first name because you're not my friend. And he asked permission to use his first name in his book report. And he said, yes, you can. You're my friend now. I thought that was hilarious. But 99.9% of the time, you're going to use their last name in the body of the work for professional purposes. And you want to kind of write whatever name they have. And then, of course, as earlier I said, if it's in quotation marks, it's the title of the article. If it's in italics, it's the book or the journal. And this is the volume of the journal, issue number, date, and then page range. So if you're only doing a chapter, so for Tuesday's commonplace book entry, you're not citing the whole book. You're only going to be citing a chapter. So if you're citing a chapter instead of the whole book, you want to look at the page range. So you'll enter the beginning page number for the beginning of that work, and then the ending. So, excuse me. And then the EBSCO host is a database, and then if it's an electronic source online, you'll find URL. But if it's just a textbook, then you don't have to put a URL because it's not necessarily a website. And then also, works cited citation should be indented. This is called a hanging indent. And what this means is that the first line is never indented, but every line after that is. And so a good way to think about that is to think about it as the opposite of a paragraph. If you're writing a paragraph and an essay, you're going to indent the first line, but not any of the others. This is the opposite. You don't indent the first line, but you indent all the others. And I know that might be difficult to do for the commonplace book entries, so not a huge deal if you can't get the work. Blackboard isn't the best when it comes to indenting, but for formal essays, you definitely should be doing that. And so what I've been talking about so far is kind of the basic format of MLA. And so a lot of times you're going to find just one author. You might find a book. It's going to be a little bit easier. But most other citations are not as easy, and they don't always look the same. I said earlier, you're only going to be able to find sources based off of what type of source they are. So sometimes there's a lot of different examples, and they get a little crazy. So for example, sometimes there isn't an author listed. And the first instinct for you might be that if there's no author, you shouldn't be using that. And that is the case for some not so credible sources, because you want to make sure your sources are credible. However, for some, it does not mean this. It means that sometimes there might be a large organization, and they are all working together in order to put a document out there. For example, a government organization, maybe the Department of Education, maybe they were working, like hundreds of people were working together to write this document. They are not going to list 100 people on a document. It's just not going to be feasible. So they put the department on there, and they get credit through that department. But so typically that's the case. A large amount of people is working on something. Sometimes if it does look a little bit not credible and there's no author, might want to be cautious of it, analyze a little bit more. But if they don't have an author in terms of citation purposes, you're always going to start your in-text citation and your works cited citation with whatever comes first. So say, for example, you have the article titled next. After the author's name, if there's nothing, you just start with whatever naturally would come next in that citation. And so then in alphabetical order, the first thing you would see is the state tax debate. And so down here, some examples of in-text citations. So you would have, political margins, if that's the title of the essay and there's no author, it's in quotation marks in the parentheses. Same thing here, this is the book title. So the Situation Room, you would have that there. So you would go, you don't put like no author, or don't put like the publisher first or anything. You should start with whatever comes next. And it's for this reason that I generally advise, if you're citing something in a paper, to start with the works cited page first, or the works cited citation for that source first, because then it's easier to do the in-text citation. Because if there is no author, you might not realize that right away. And then you go, oh, I accidentally put the wrong thing. Maybe there's an editor and you accidentally put them. This way you know for sure this is what's coming in my in-text citation. If you have more than one author, so if you have 2 or 3 authors, you always want to put the first person last name, first name, but the second and third person would go first name, last name, and of course any middle initial and middle name that's in there. So it would be like this person and if you had like 3 people, you go A, B, and C, or whoever they are, and then the rest of the information that you need. If you had an in-text citation with multiple authors, it would look like this. You would just put all 3 of their last name in the order that they're mentioned. So you go Smith, Yang, and Moore. So if you ever don't know who am I supposed to cite or which order do I cite their names in, it's whatever they're ordered in. So most of the time, the first person listed is either the person who did the most work or it's the person that is maybe the most famous and they can maybe publicize that book a little bit more. Oftentimes, it might be both. That person who's the most famous might have done the most work. And so it kind of depends one way or another. And then that's for, if you have 1, 2, or 3 authors, you always list their name out. If you have 4 or more authors, you want to put the last name of the name of the person who's listed first. And after that, you would put this little thing called et al. And that is meant to actually save you work because you don't have to list 4, 5, 10, 20 authors if a lot of people are listed there, because a lot of times many authors collaborate on the same work. And so in order to save people time and also not have to read 10 authors, all of it, you should simply put their last name and then et al. And then the page number if applicable. And so that's really important, and you can come back to that later. If you're citing 2 books that illustrate the same idea, you put a semicolon in between them. And so this doesn't happen too much, but if you find 2 things and you have this idea and you want to give credit to both sources, you would put a semicolon in between them in the works in the in-text citation. But you would include both works cited page in the bottom of your essay. Citing with multiple sources, I just talked about the et al. Making sure that. This slide here, a work in an anthology, reference, or collection, this is going to be really important to most of the works we cite for the commonplace book entries. So each one might be a little bit different, but the general format is going to be similar to each one of them. And the reason for this is a work in anthology, reference, or collection. It is a smaller piece of work, like a chapter, and a larger work. So when I say you're citing the chapter of the textbook, again, you're not citing the entire book. If you were citing the entire book, you would just go last name, the names of the authors, and then you would jump to italics, the name of the book. But if you're citing a small chapter, you are telling your reader that the information you're referring to only came within those pages. So it's really important to know that. That's why you have this quotation mark here. So another point to make sure, this example has edited by. Not every source is going to have edited by. Some of them, like I'm going to show an example here in a second, like the essay we're going to read next Thursday. Next Thursday, you're going to have this essay called American Dreams. And I'll make this a little bit bigger here for you all. American Dreams is the essay we're reading on Thursday. You're going to do the chapter textbook on Tuesday, American Dreams next Thursday. The author of this essay is Kevin Jennings. He is the author. He would, at the beginning of a citation, would put Jennings, comma, Kevin. Okay, title American Dreams, and then you would put the title of the book, which is this up here: Growing Up Gay, Growing Up Lesbian, a literary anthology. But you also have this name down here named Bennett Singer. Sometimes you have it say edited by, but Bennett Singer isn't the person who wrote American Dreams, but he is the editor of the whole book. And what this means is that he compiled all the essays in the book. He made sure that they were ready for publication, that there were no grammatical errors, that there was no more revisions that needed to be done. He decided which essays were going to go in which order. He decided, like, if there were different sections that they needed to be put in, that he would put in there. He designed the whole nature of the book, but he did not write the words on the page. And so if you have a book where the writer of the essay you're reading is different from the name at the beginning, usually they're either here or up here somewhere on the front page, you're going to have an edited by after the book title. This shows that they're not the same. Your textbook will not have an edited by, because the people who wrote the textbook are the same people who wrote every chapter. The only difference is if you have there's a reader within it. And so if you cite a small essay by one of the people in the reader, that's when you might do an edited by. But if you're just citing a chapter as a whole, they are the same people who wrote that entire chapter. They wrote chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and all of it. Okay, so you'd only have to have an edited by if this name is different from this name, because Bennett Singer did not write the words on the page, but he prepared it for publication. The textbook is a little bit different. Now, one other thing here too is if you have a textbook that it's an edition, and also I'm telling you, all this is complicated. Don't have to memorize any of this. I'm just telling you that if you have an edition, like the textbook is the 12th edition. When I started here 4 years ago, we were on the 10th. So if you want an edition, you don't have this included here, but you would put it after this. So it's a 12th edition, so you would put 12 ed, okay? And then you would get rid of the edited by. Regardless, it's always going to come after the book title. And so you always want to make sure to include the edition. If there is one, you will know. For example, I think I have the textbook as a, there's this. I only have a digital copy of this. Let's see if I can find the opening part of this. I think I probably can. Acknowledgements. Is it not going to show me the beginning of this? Probably not. No. Okay, anyway, on the very first, the cover of your book, it's not showing me the beginning of it. On the cover of your book, it will say 12th edition. It's not showing me right here for whatever reason. It's just on their website, the publisher's website. So you would see 12th edition or 11th edition or whatever it is. This is typically with textbooks. It can happen with other books as well, but typically with textbooks. So you got the name, title of the chapter, book title, edited and or edition. Then you'd have the publisher, and the publisher is the people who put it out into the world. So if you're looking at a newspaper, the publisher would be New York Times. They're not the author, but they're the platform that's giving these authors words, okay, and able to be published out into the world. So this, I think the textbooks like Bedford St. Martin's or something similar, but they could have all different publishers. I'm not able to see, or no, maybe it's Macmillan. Oh, shucks, I don't remember. It will say, if you have the physical copy of it, it will say it on the very first page or on the spine of the actual book as well. It'll say at the very first page of it. So hopefully, I don't think any of you are going to have access to it from the website, but it should say it somewhere in the beginning. And then you would have the year it was published, which is the beginning, and then the page entry. So I can actually look here at this information. So example, this would be 1994. If it's edition, if there's multiple years, you only pick the one that's first. So if it's 1994 and 1990 and 2000, not 2000, but 1985, pick multiple years, you pick the most recent one up to that point. So that's the year of edition. All the other previous are the years that the previous editions were published, but you pick that year that the current one was. And then the page range. So if it's 48 to 68, you put those numbers. Okay, these are some examples. So this is the title, the name of the author, chapter title. Then you have the book title, edited by, publisher, year, and page range. Okay, so 2 examples here. And again, they're going to be different depending on if you have an edition or if it's been edited or something. And that's a little bit difficult sometimes to know. I'm really bad at thinking about this. Current slide. Okay. So moving on. A lot of times you might be citing from a website. So if that's the case, I talked about earlier, it's a good idea to put the access date at the end so people know the exact date that you did it. You would have, the same thing. You would have the author name at the beginning, title of the article, because most, if not most art websites, you're going to be citing an article. It's a little bit different if you're citing an entire website, but if you're citing it in like an essay for English class, I doubt that you're citing an entire website. You're probably going to be citing an essay within. So essay in quotation marks, and then the publisher, and then year, and then URL, and then the access date. I talked about this earlier. Addressing an author, make sure that you're using a name that is provided. You know, if their name is James, don't just all of a sudden call them Jim or Jimmy because you feel like it. Call them what they have said their name is going to be, and also try to refer to them as their last name in the actual essay itself when you're talking about them. And you can also go to Purdue OWL, like I said, to look at other stuff, other information, use information that is really quick. Let's see, we've got page number. So if there's no page number, you can put NP. There's no date, you can put ND. And if there's no publisher, do not use the source at all. There should 100% of the time always be a publisher. So if you can't find one, it's not a good source. Don't use it. Rare of cutting and pasting. I talked about this at the very beginning of this PowerPoint when I was talking about the complex book entry. Make sure that you're using, that you know that if a citation is wrong, you know how. And if you're ever confused for whatever reason, you always feel free to email me. Depending on what day or time you email me, I might not get back to you right away. Especially if it's Tuesday or Thursday. I'm constantly in class, especially as of next week. But you always want to make sure that your citation is correct. And so a lot of times when I see citations, especially for Essay 3, if a student provides 5 citations and one of them is an APA format, but the other an MLA, I can pretty much rest assured that at least that APA citation was cut and paste from a citation generator, such as EasyBib, and not done themselves, because the other 4 were correct, and if that person actually knew what they were doing, they would have caught the 5th one. So if you ever have a question, I want everybody to learn what they're doing. Again, never going to have a quiz, but I do want us to make sure by the time we get to that 2nd and 3rd paper, we have a pretty strong idea of how to cite. And then quotations. Most of these are probably familiar with you. If you have a shorter quotation, it would just be like in a sentence or 2, and you would provide an in-text citation just like it's provided here. A lot of people don't know about block quotes. These are longer quotations. And so if you have, I think it's 4 or more lines of quotes, and I'm going to, again, just real quick, put this into my web page here so I can show everybody what this might be. I have that link there if you ever want to look at it before in the future. And longer quotations, they're just going to look like this. So 4 more lines of quotes. You actually would not put quotation marks around it. What you would do is you would just tab over and then put the in-text citation at the end. And the reason for this is so the reader doesn't just look, oh, here's an entire paragraph, and they just have quotes. And so they can more easily see what language is your words and what language is this other person's words. And so you would just tab over once, hit that tab button, and you got it. A lot of times in the future, if I see this, I might have another link to this website because I like it. It does have a specific example, and you can kind of see that there way, way more easily. And then if you're omitting a word in a quote, sometimes if there's extra information, if there's a list of something that you're looking at and you only want to provide 1 or 2, you can have ellipses, which is just 3 dots. And you're not, by doing this, you're not plagiarizing, you're not saying that the quote was incorrect. You're acknowledging that there was a lot of information in that quote you didn't need in your essay, but you didn't want to incorrectly say it wasn't there to begin with. So if somebody looked at this quote, they'd be able to see a lot more information in between those dots. If you're adding words to a quote, you can use a bracket there. And so a lot of times this is used if you have a quote that maybe earlier on in the page or the paragraph gave more information, but the quote that you're wanting doesn't give it. And so you want your reader to be able to understand what this quote is referring to. So in the bracket, who retell urban legends, this author, Brunvand, he may have said that exact same thing in the last paragraph of the previous page or earlier on in that chapter. However, because they didn't write that here, they've already said it to their audience, you want to be able to show your audience of that too. So you say people who retell urban legends, and you just have that there. Summaries and paraphrases, I talked about that earlier. You can, of course, summarize the entire book or chapter. You can paraphrase a smaller sentence or paragraph. But either way, you're putting them in your own words, and you always must cite them. And pay attention to placement of punctuation. I'm going to show what I do. So if I have a source, because again, I don't even remember what goes in everything. So if I'm trying to cite, this might seem overwhelming, but if I'm trying to cite a book, just a book with one author, and I'm like, I don't remember the order of everything. Okay, I'm really not going to. Off the top of my head, I can look and see if it's wrong, but I'm not going to remember something or not. I'm going to copy and paste it into my works cited page, and I'm trying to make this a little bit bigger so you can also see it, not smaller. Okay, and what I'm going to do, before I do anything, is I'm just going to put in what my book would need. So if I say, Smith, John, this isn't a real book, I'm just doing this because I want you all kind of see my process of it. And you could say, writing for college. Okay. And then take out citations, the publisher. I'm making up this publisher. It's probably not real. Actually, it's a Thursday. It's not even a Tuesday. Books. And then you could say, hey, 2020. Okay. And so what this does by copy and pasting, you're not going to use this citation, but it allows you to see the format of what you're using. So last name, first name, book title, publisher title, and then the year. And because this isn't really helpful, only because there are so many ways to cite. You can go to other common sources and you can cite interview, you can cite a speech, you can cite a painting or a photograph, a movie, TV show, podcast, comedy album. You can cite just about anything. I think a YouTube video was at the bottom of electronic sources. You can comment. You can cite a comment on a website or article, a YouTube video, a tweet. For live, you can cite just about anything, but this is not going to be the same as citing a website. It's going to be specific to a YouTube video. So making sure I would just copy and paste this in my works cited page and then enter the information that I specifically had from the YouTube video that I'm using. So I've been talking a lot. I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment. So I'm getting a lot of, it's a lot to memorize. I'm not going to make anybody memorize anything. Does anybody have any specific questions about anything that I just went over? I know it's a lot, but I want to give you guys time to ask any questions if you have any. It still won't let you submit a journal entry. Lana, what are you using? Chrome or Firefox? What are you specifically using? What? Chrome. That should work. Do you by chance have a Google a Chromebook? Yes. Okay. Shucks. That probably means you can't download like Outlook or Firefox, because I have the same version. It's just for Microsoft. I actually don't like it. I only use it because my computer I'm on right now basically is a laptop and it won't charge very easily, so I kind of have to keep it in the same place. But that probably means you can't do that. What I would do before you do anything, I would try to contact the Blackboard help. That's the same thing I talked about earlier in the class period. If they don't know the problem, because there might be something wrong specifically with your Blackboard, and I'm only concerned because the way that Jeffco is taking attendance this semester is through your assignments submitted through Blackboard. So if we can get it to work at all, I do want it to potentially try to work. So if you don't remember what I said, let me return back to this just for a moment. I got so many tabs up. This is usually what it looks like for me. Oh, where's my Jeffco? Okay, so you would go to like, if I'm on the Jeffco main page, you go to academics, kind of hover your little mouse over here, and you should be able to go to online learning, and down the bottom, click on Blackboard help. And there, you should be able to just click this little button that says tech support online, and we'll give you a place where you can like put your name, and then you can just hit start chat, and you can just really quickly, you know, say, I'm trying to use Blackboard. I can't submit a journal entry, because I know it's not the whole Blackboard shell to begin with, because a lot of people submitted that assignment on Tuesday. And so I want to make, so is that okay, Alana? Are you able to go to Blackboard and ask for help? I'll make sure you can or not. Do you know where to find that? Hopefully. Yes. Okay, cool. Awesome. So go, if for any reason you're not able to find out a solution, or they don't know, just send me an email and I can, I don't know, do something else based on the situation. Tori's asking, how do we find recordings? It's an excellent question. So it takes a little bit, like a day or so, for me to get these recordings. But if you go on Blackboard, at the very bottom of this first section, there's a little tab called Recordings of Classes. And I actually have the recordings from Tuesday's class up on Blackboard right now. So if you wanted to look at that, you can. After this class is finished, I'm going to send the recording to the Tech Center, the great people there at Jeffco. They are also going to be working to what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry, I just had a brain fart. Wow, I'm having a horrible brain fart right now. There's a word I'm looking for. To caption, that's the word I'm looking for. They're going to work to caption. So if anybody, has trouble hearing, or even if you don't and you need captions, they're going to caption them. When I originally put them up, they're not going to be captioned, but they usually take around 2 weeks to do so. And so just check back for that. And I will, for every class period, the beginning of that class period, I'm going to say I am recording now. And then from that point on, until the point I say I'm stopping recording, I'm going to be recording. So yeah, you can go on Blackboard and look at those. And I'll just gradually add class periods recordings in those as the semester goes on. So if you forgot something, you wanted to rewatch this information at MLA format, or just 10 minutes of it, feel free to go and do that too. Excellent question. Any other questions anybody has about MLA format, about commonplace book entries, about where to find something? We have a little bit of time for any other questions that anybody might have. I'm going to kind of wait another minute just to make sure nobody's waiting to put in the text box. Okay, Colby, so when you said, okay, assignment, yeah, so assignment here under Blackboard, and so I think my screen is still shared. No, it's not. Let me present it again. I'm sorry, I'm going back and forth presenting and not presenting. I don't want to present my screen if I don't have to. So they're on Blackboard in the left-hand side here tab, there's a little button that says commonplace book entries. And up here, you'll be able to submit it. And the readings won't be attached to here, but you'll be able to see what the is due. So Tuesday, August 28th, I have, that's the wrong title of the textbook. The chapter is called Recalling and Observing, I think, and we can change that. But it's still chapter 4, regardless of the title of it. And so you can see that, go to your chapter textbook. Again, if anybody has a problem getting their textbook, let me know. And I have an old scan of the other textbook that will have to suffice, but ideally try and get your textbook this week. And then if there's any other commonplace book entry reading that's not on the textbook, it's going to be under this tab called assigned readings, and you can look at them right here. If anybody has trouble accessing and downloading them, please let me know. But the other place you can look at, of course, as I said earlier, at the bottom of the syllabus on the schedule, that exact same information is going to be there as well. So Colby, did that answer your question? Okay, cool. And Tori, yeah, I did get your campus hunt, so I'll be sure to take a look at that. Any other questions that anybody has? These are great questions. Now is a great time to ask anything that you might be confused about. Unfortunately, I can't know if anybody's confused. So usually in the classroom, I could at least like see if you have a face of shock on you and see if I can kind of go over something. But now it's even harder for me to figure that out. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'm very happy to answer anything at all. Worst case scenario, you can email me later. But yeah, so make sure you do that complex book entry before Tuesday's class, not during or after, but it's before. It's due by 12:29 p.m., right before class starts. If you have any questions, I can definitely help anybody. Okay, so it looks like nobody else has another question. I will stick around for just a few minutes after this class is over. I'm going to go ahead and start recording right around now. I have been recording this whole time. So